Summers with my grandparents. When I was younger, I used to spend a month or so every summer with my grandparents. I'm sure this was an excuse for my mom and dad to get some much-needed alone time, but be that as it may, I always remember looking forward to the visit. I'd spend my days playing board games and watching game shows or baseball games with my grandpa, who would sometimes take me out into the woods out behind their house to follow game trails or try to photograph the wildlife. My grandmother spent most of her time in her garden, sitting in her old chair and taking in the sunshine. She'd come in as it got dark and watch lovingly as Grandpa and I played Uno or Yahtzee. Those summer visits were always very relaxing, and I enjoyed them very much. The summer that I turned 7, things changed. My grandpa sort of withdrew from me and my grandma. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. He'd do little things, like go to sleep without saying goodnight to us, or forgetting that the Cubs were playing that afternoon. Small things that don't feel like they're that off, you know. After about a week, those small things became a bit bigger. I remember hearing him cry at night a lot. He'd often wake up much later than he used to, and he often wore the same clothes for 3 or 4 days in a row. I was a little concerned, but at the age of 7, I had very little understanding of emotions, much less enough empathy developed to ask him about it, so I didn't really learn much more about what was going on with him. My grandmother often appeared concerned, but also didn't say anything. She'd just sit beside me on the couch, wordlessly place her hand on mine, and smile softly. Just letting me know that everything was okay, I suppose. She had always been good at that. The 3rd week into my visit, I awoke one night to strange noises. I slowly crept out of my room and saw my grandpa standing in the hall, staring at pictures of him and Grandma. He had a bottle in one hand, which I can now identify as whiskey, that he was taking large gulps from. He swayed and muttered things under his breath angrily, though I couldn't make out what he was saying. My grandmother saw this as well, and when she saw that I had awoken, she put me back to bed, kissed my forehead, smiling that apologetic smile, and left the room. The noises in the hallway stopped shortly after. I didn't see much of my grandpa that final week. He stayed in his room for most of the day, coming out mostly to get meals put together and to make sure I hadn't gotten myself into any trouble. I hadn't, as I was weary at this point. Even at 7, I was acutely aware of how strange Grandpa was acting. Grandma and I spent time reading books and doing puzzles, and while this passed the time, I couldn't help but feel worried for Grandpa. Then, as if out of nowhere, the last 2 days, my grandpa was his old self. I rejoiced as we watched a baseball game together, complete with popcorn and hot dogs that he had made. We took an extended trip out into the woods, Polaroid cameras snapping furiously as we photographed everything we could find. The last night, before my parents came to pick me up, my grandpa was as vocal as he had ever been, recalling stories of how he and Grandma had met, had my dad, and the shenanigans that he used to get up to. I had such a good time that the previous few weeks seemed to be just a simple mistake. My parents picked me up and asked how I had enjoyed the visit. I said that Grandpa had been acting a little weird. Mom arched her eyebrow and asked me what I meant. I just said that he didn't seem to be himself the whole time. Dad made mention of how it's understandable that he's been off. He said something that, at that age, I was unsure of how to take. He said, he's been a little different since Mom passed. At first, I didn't understand what he had meant, and I told him as much. Oh, kiddo, your grandpa was a very lively guy once. When he and your grandma were both alive, they'd travel and experience life together. Since she died, he's been lonely, and I think he really lives for this time with you. But Grandma's not dead. Oh, well, kiddo, you never met her, you know? She passed away a year or so before you were born. That's when hindsight hit me. Grandma, I had no idea what her voice sounded like. She never ate with us. I don't remember ever seeing her and Grandpa talking, hugging, anything. That winter, my grandpa committed suicide. Had I been older, I'd like to think I saw the signs. As it was, I was much too young to really understand depression or the associated symptoms and signs. What I do remember, though, is Grandpa's funeral. I remember crying, but not because my grandpa had died. I cried because I watched them, hand in hand, smiling at me from by the coffin. I saw them both wave to me and walk out the door of the funeral home, finally together.